very eager. All right, so first lesson that we have to understand here is that when Yahweh makes a covenant, He does so with His power and with His truth. And we can therefore rely on His greatness. We can risk it all. We can rest assured also that He takes notice of our calamities, and He's also aware when our enemies gain their strength. When He talks with Moses, He reminds him to speak to the people and tell them that He's been watching them. He knows that they're suffering, and that He's about to rescue them. He wants them to be happy. He intends for them to be His people. He intends to use them to attain His own end, His glory. It's just like it is today. When Moses spoke to Yahweh, the words to the people, they wouldn't listen to him because they were so discouraged. And you would think that Yahweh's words would be enough to get the people to pull themselves up by their own sandal straps. But no. It's just like it is today. We often find ourselves consumed by our own misery, forgetting His promise and the sacrifice He and His only Son made for us. Our fear paralyzes us. It causes us to relent to worldly pressure. We ignore His promises, and He can even tongue-tie us. We too may find it an impossibility to speak the right words. We see Moses lamenting again to Yahweh about his poor speaking abilities. Here's Moses at his wit's end. It's a time where things seem to be going from bad to worse. Moses pleads with Yahweh, but we must remember that Yahweh chooses whom He wishes to regardless of their shortcomings. Moses is at a loss for what to do. Strong passions oppose strong consolations, but Yahweh quiets his mind. Let's go to Psalms 12. I'll read it for you. Help, Adonai, for no one godly is left. The faithful have vanished from humankind. They all tell lies to each other, flattering with their lips, but speaking from divided hearts. May Adonai cut off all flattering lips, and the tongue that speaks so proudly. Those who say, by our tongues we will prevail. Our lips are with us. Who can master us? Because the poor are oppressed, because the needy are groaning. I will now rise up, says Adonai, and grant security to those whom they scorn. The words of Adonai are pure words, silver in a melting pot set in the earth, refined and purified 7 times over. You, Adonai, protect us, guard us forever from this generation. The wicked strut about everywhere when vileness is held in general esteem. When the moment seems like it can't get any worse, when we are feeling the most overwhelmed, we need to ask Yahweh to rescue us, to give us strength, to put His words and patience into our minds. Then we leave it up to Him. Yahweh tells Moses He'll redeem them with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. Then they will know that they are His people and He is their God. What we are about to witness is the Lord redeeming His people, using His might when the efforts of man have failed. The word redeem stands out because it basically means to free one from captivity by payment of ransom. The Israelites could not extricate themselves from the Egyptians. They were held captive under hideous, deplorable conditions. But Yahweh promises to redeem them. 2,000 years ago, He sent His Son, Yeshua, to redeem the whole world from our Egypt. Yes. Paganism, sin, a life of separation from Yahweh. How awesome for the Creator to bother with us. his creation, who've been disobeying and disappointing him since the very beginning. After Yahweh speaks to Moses and Aaron, he gives marching orders for the people and a warning for Pharaoh. He will use his power to not only effect a release, but to bring justice while breaking down a mere human being who will not bend. On a personal note, when I worked for a small jail in Alaska, I watched many prideful and arrogant and self-centered people break. It's not a pretty sight, and no one should ever take any satisfaction from it. Some people cannot face their own shortcomings, and they try to take the long-term solution to a short-term problem: suicide. Others allow their obstinance to destroy themselves, their families, and their friends. It's human nature to become angry, discouraged, depressed, and demoralized when we're given hardships or assigned monumental tasks to accomplish, especially ones that make absolutely no sense. It's how we handle the crisis of belief, our emotions, and our subsequent actions that display whether or not we are committed to Yahweh. Moses is put in place of God to Pharaoh and Aaron, is to be his prophet. Here we see Moses clothed in great power and authority. Both he and Aaron are given divine authority to accomplish tasks, to speak and act in God's name, to demand obedience and punish disobedience. Moses was made God. Not the God, but God by commission. Not a God by nature. Moses was a made God. Moses was made God over Pharaoh. Yahweh's wish for us is peaceful, but he uses men to treat other men. Yahweh is using his people to make himself known to them, and thus bring glory to his name by rescuing them. Their struggle will not be in vain. In the process, he'll use his power to pour out his wrath on Pharaoh and Egypt, thus making himself known also to the Egyptians. He'll use Moses, Aaron, Pharaoh, and the Hebrews to make himself exalted throughout the world. That's powerful smart. We see that Pharaoh's heart was hardened. His free will was removed by Yahweh. This is because Yahweh had already set aside the pagan Egypt for judgment. Pharaoh was thought to be a god in Egypt. So Yahweh was determined to show his power over Pharaoh, the elements, and nature, to prove that he's in charge. The actions of Pharaoh have reverberated throughout the millennia. Let's read about this in Ezekiel 28:25, and we'll go to 29:21. Adonai Elohim says, "Once I have gathered the house of Israel from the peoples among whom they are scattered, once I have shown my holiness in them as the Goyim watch, then they will live in their own land, which I gave to my servant Jacob. They will have security when they live there, building houses and planting vineyards. Yes, they will live in safety. Once I have executed judgments against all their contemptuous neighbors, then they will know that I am Adonai, their God." On the 12th day of the 12th month of the 12th year, the word of Adonai came to me. "Human being, turn your face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Prophesy against him and against all Egypt. Speak out and say that Adonai Elohim says, I am against you, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, you big crocodile, laying in the streams of the Nile. You say, my Nile is mine. I made it for myself. But I will put hooks in your jaws and make your Nile fish stick on your scales. Yes, I will bring you up from your Nile with all your Nile fish sticking to your scales and leave you in the desert. you and all your Nile fish. You will fall in the open field and not be gathered or buried, but I will give you as food to wild animals and birds. Then all who live in Egypt will know that I am Adonai, because they have been a support made of straw for the house of Israel. When they grasped you in the hand, you splintered, and threw all their shoulders out of joint. Then they leaned on you, you broke, and made them all wrench their backs. Therefore, Adonai Elohim says, I will bring the sword against you and eliminate both your people and your animals. The land of Egypt will become a desolate waste, and they will know that I am Adonai, because he said, the Nile is mine. I made it, so I am against you and your Nile, and I will make the land of Egypt a totally desolate waste, from Migdol to Savannah, and all the way to the border of Ethiopia. No human foot will pass through it, and no animal foot will pass through it. And it will be annihilated, uninhabited for 40 years. Yes, I will make the land of Egypt desolate, even when compared with other desolate countries. Likewise, her cities in comparison with other ruined cities. They will be a desolate 40 years. They will be desolate 40 years. I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and disperse them through the countries. For this is what Adonai Elohim says. At the end of 40 years, I will gather the Egyptians from the peoples where they were scattered. I will restore the fortunes of Egypt and cause them to return to the land of their origin, Patros. But there they will be a humble kingdom, the humblest of kingdoms. It will never again dominate other nations. I will reduce them so that they never again rule over other nations. Moreover, they will no longer be a source of confidence for Israel to turn to. Rather, it will bring to mind their guilt in having turned to them before. Then they will know that I am Adonai Elohim. On the first day of the first month of the 27th year, the word of Adonai came to me. Human being, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babel, and his army mount a massive expedition against Zoar. The loads of dirt they carried made every head bald and every shoulder raw. Yet neither he nor his army derived any benefit from Zoar out of his expedition against it. Therefore Adonai Elohim says, I will give the land of Egypt to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babel. He will carry off its riches, take its spoil and its prey, and those will be the wages for his army. I am giving him the land of Egypt as his wages for which he worked, because they were working for me, says Adonai Elohim. When that day comes, I will cause power to return to the house of Israel, and I will enable you, Ezekiel, to open your mouth among them. Then they will know that I am Adonai. Let's also go to Isaiah 66, and we're going to read verse 1 through 24. Heaven is my throne, says Adonai, and the earth is my footstool. What kind of house could you build for me? What kind of place could you devise for my rest? Didn't I myself make all these things? This is how they all came to be, says Adonai. The kind of person on whom I look with favor is one with a poor and humble spirit, who trembles at my word. Those others might as well kill a person as an ox, as well break a dog's neck as sacrifice a lamb, as well offer pig's blood as offer a grain offering, as well bless an idol as burn incense. Just as these have chosen their ways and enjoy their disgusting practices, so I will enjoy making fools of them and bring on them the very things they fear. For when I called, no one answered. When I spoke, they did not hear. Instead, they did what was evil in my sight and chose what did not please me. Hear the word of Adonai, you who tremble at his word. You brothers who hate you and reject you because of my name have said, let Adonai be glorified, so we can see your joy. But they will be put to shame. That uproar in the city, that sound from the temple, is the sound of Adonai repaying his foes what they deserved. Before going into labor, she gave birth. Before her pains came, she delivered a male child. Who ever heard of such a thing? Who has ever seen such things? Is a country born in one day? Is a nation brought forth all at once? For as soon as Zion went into labor, she brought forth her children. Would I let the baby break through and not be born, says Adonai? Would I who caused the birth shut the womb, asked your God? Rejoice with Jerusalem. Be glad with her, all you who love her. Rejoice, rejoice with her, all of you who mourned her, so that you will nurse and be satisfied by her comforting breast, drinking deeply and delight in the overflow of her glory. For Adonai says, I will spread shalom over her like a river, and the wealth of nations like a flooding stream. You will nurse and be carried in her arm and cuddled in her lap, like someone comforted by his mother. I will comfort you in Jerusalem. You will be comforted. Your heart will rejoice at the sight. Your bodies will flourish like newly sprouted grass. It will be known that the land of Adonai is with his servants, and with his enemies his fury. For look, Adonai will come in fire, and his chariots will be like the whirlwind to render his anger furiously, his rebuke with blazing fire. For Adonai will judge all humanity with fire and with the sword, and those slain by Adonai will be many. Those who consecrate and purify themselves in order to enter the gardens, then follow the one who was already there, eating pig meat, reptiles, and mice, will all be destroyed together, says Adonai, for I know their deeds and their thoughts. The time is coming when I will gather together all nations and languages. They will come and see my glory, and I will give them a sign. I will send some of their survivors to the nations of Tarshish, Pul, Lud, Tuval, Greece, and more distant coasts, where they have neither heard of my fame nor seen my glory. They will proclaim my glory in these nations, and they will bring all your kinsmen out of the nations as an offering to Adonai, on horses, in chariots, in wagons, on mules, on camels, to my holy mountain Jerusalem, says Adonai, just as the people of Israel themselves bring their offsprings in clean vessels to the house of Adonai. I will also take Kohanim and leave them from them, says Adonai. For just as the new heavens and the new earth that I am making will continue in my presence, says Adonai, so will your descendants and your name continue. Yahweh controls all world events. Just as it was then, it will be in the future. We as believers must separate and remove ourselves from our own personal Egypts. Could Pharaoh have repented?
Yes.
Did he have the choice? Sure. If he had renounced his crown and the spiritual claims that came with it, and if he'd given his life to Yahweh. But he'd never do that. And boy, was he wrong. Yahweh knew it all beforehand. So next we witness a true tug of war between Yahweh and man. And guess who always wins? Moses and Aaron go to work now without further objection. Let's go to Psalms 105, and we're going to read verse 26 through 38. He sent his servant Moses and Aaron, whom he had chosen. They worked his signs among them, his wonders in the land of Ham. He sent darkness, and the land grew dark. They did not defy his word. He turned their water into blood and caused their fish to die. Their land swarmed with frogs, even in the royal chambers. He spoke, and there came swarms of insects and lice throughout their land. He gave them hail instead of rain, with fiery lightning throughout their land, and struck their vines and fig trees, shattering trees all over their country. He spoke, and locusts came, also grasshopper without number, and they ate up everything green in their land, devoured the fruit of their ground. He struck down all the firstborn in their land, the first fruits of all their strength. Jonah was at first reluctant to travel to Nineveh. And Joseph was 30 years old when he was just a servant to Pharaoh. Aaron here is 83 and Moses is 80. And it's fitting that Moses should begin his leadership at a wise old age. At first, Moses instructed Pharaoh on what Yahweh wanted. Now he's going to show his credentials. Every time Pharaoh attempts to challenge Yahweh, he causes his people, who blindly and apparently unbegrudgingly follow or obey their leader, severe grief, which is the case of many leaders today, who deceive people into thinking that they are perfect and have the answers to everything. Pharaoh and his cronies honestly believed that they could take on the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And they even attempted to use magic in their attempts to discredit him. And boy, were they wrong. Aaron takes his staff and creates a miracle. It becomes a snake. This should cause instant fear. Once I saw this big black snake cross a river. It was twisting and swimming like a torpedo, with its head sticking out of the water. And as it swam across, it was looking around, probably for something to kill. It crossed about 25 yards of river in 4 seconds. I was sitting up on a hill in a restaurant 100 feet away watching this through a window, and I almost screamed.
That's true.
But Pharaoh was not fearful. This wasn't a plague, but it certainly threatened one. He has his sorcerers conjure up their own snakes. Now Moses had lived in Egypt for 40 years, and he might have learned some magic himself. Maybe these magicians saw the competition as personal. Joseph had already embarrassed them once by correctly interpreting Pharaoh's dreams. So maybe the magicians had an axe to grind with the Hebrews. Let's go to 2 Timothy 3 and read verses 1 through 9.
Walter, the beautiful thing about that was Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods.
Yes.
The word there is
Talk it out.
So we're going to read 2 Timothy 3, 1 through 9. Moreover, understand this. In the end times will come trying times. People will be self-loving, money-loving, proud, arrogant, insulting, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, uncontrolled, brutal, hateful of good, traitorous, headstrong, swollen with conceit, loving pleasure rather than God, as they retain the outer form of religion but deny its power. Stay away from these people, for some of them worm their way into homes and get control of weak-willed women who are heaped with sins and swayed by various impulses, who are always learning but never able to come to full knowledge of the truth. In the same way as Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses, so also these people oppose the truth. They are people with corrupted minds, whose trust cannot pass the test. However, they won't get very far because everyone will see how stupid they are, just as happened with these two. So here Paul is warning Timothy to beware of people like Jannes and Jambres, the magicians opposing Moses. He calls them corrupted, untruthful, and stupid. Paul recognizes here the risks of placing a young, sensitive minister in charge of Ephesus. This kind of opposition to truth can make Yahweh very mad. Aaron throws his staff down and it swallows up the magician's snakes. Yahweh's power is indeed greater than man's. God permitted this illusion for wise and holy ends, that those who would believe a lie would not receive the truth. And with that, the Lord was righteous. The cause of God will undoubtedly triumph at last over all competition and contradiction, and he will reign alone. Let's turn to Daniel 2, verse 36 through 49. see here that Daniel was the kind of king and the kind of attendant a king wants. That is what you dreamt. And now we will give the king its interpretation. Your Majesty, King of Kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory, so that wherever people, wild animals, or birds in the air live, he has handed them over to you and enabled you to rule them all. You are the head of gold. But after you another kingdom will rise, inferior to you. Then a third kingdom of bronze, which will rule the whole world. The fourth kingdom will be as strong as iron. Iron can break anything into pieces, pulverize it, and crush it. So just as iron can crush anything, this kingdom will break the other kingdoms into pieces and crush them. Finally, you saw the feet and toes made partly of pottery clay and partly of iron. This will be a divided kingdom, yet it will have some of the firmness of the iron, since you saw the iron mixed with clay from the ground, just as the toes of the feet were part iron and part clay. This kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. You saw the iron mixed with clay. That means that they will cement their alliances by intermarriages, but they won't stick together any more than iron blends with clay. In the days those kings, the God of heaven will establish a kingdom that will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not pass into the hands of another people. It will break to pieces and consume all the kingdoms, but it itself will stand forever, like the stone you saw, which without human hands separated itself from the mountain and broke to pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. The great God has revealed to the king what will come about in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is reliable. The king Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and worshipped Daniel. He ordered that a grain offering and incense be offered to him. To Daniel the king said, "Your God is indeed the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and the revealer of secrets, since you have been able to reveal this secret." The king promoted Daniel to a high rank, gave him many rich gifts, and made him governor of the entire province of Babel, and head of all sages of Babel. At Daniel's request, the king put Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in charge of the affairs of the province of Babel, while Daniel remained in attendance on the king. Daniel was one who used wisdom to understand visions and dreams. He was a man whose relationship with God made his counsel 10 times better than all the exorcists and magicians in the kingdom. But as we see here, Pharaoh's heart continues to remain hardened. Moses and Aaron do exactly what Yahweh has ordered them, and they turn the Nile to blood. Now, water is the one resource that, when removed, should create widespread fear and panic. The fish in the river die. This is a major food source, and it makes a terrible stink. The magicians use their secret arts to duplicate turning water into blood. Pharaoh turns his back, and he walks away into the palace unconcerned. So why didn't the magicians restore the river? And why didn't Pharaoh even command them to? Because these were actions designed to ridicule Yahweh and to prove to all the people that Pharaoh was unafraid, all-knowing, and all-powerful. And boy, was he wrong. Let's go to Job 36. We're going to read 11 through 14. If they pay attention and obey him, they spend their days in prosperity. Their years pass pleasantly. But if they don't pay attention, they perish by the sword and die without learning their lesson. The godless in heart cherish their anger, not crying for help when he binds them. Their soul perishes in their youth, and their life becomes depraved. So here Pharaoh